Welcome to I'll Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Up Next series, where faculty researchers and alumni weigh in on the trends currently shaping the world of business. On today's episode, I talk with Peter Rodriguez, Dean of Rice Business and the key architect behind the school's most transformative decade. Since becoming dean in 2016, Peter has led Rice Business through a period of extraordinary growth, doubling MBA enrollment, launching the hybrid and online MBA programs, helping establish the Virani Undergraduate School of Business, and expanding the alumni network to more than 10,000 strong. Along the way, Rice Business has continued to climb the national rankings and built a reputation for excellence in entrepreneurship, finance, and innovation. And in 2025, Peter was named Poets and Quant's Dean of the Year. In this conversation, we talk about the vision that connects those milestones. We also look ahead to the new Rice Business Building opening this year, his perspective on AI and business education, and what he hopes remains true about Rice Business as it enters its next chapter. Dean Peter, it is fantastic to have you join me today on I'll Have You Know. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here, of course. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Well, I figured I would want to start where really kind of our relationship even began, which is the online program. Had it not been for you championing the program and making it a reality, I wouldn't be sitting here today with this microphone in front of me. So first, I owe you a debt of gratitude and a big thanks.
Well, no, I mean, the gratitude is from me to you. That's wonderful. And just hearing you say that is gratifying. I certainly remember the initial thoughts on the program, how we got here, the big role it played in everything we've been trying to build. And that's a good feeling. That's kind of why I'm in this business, is to bring people like you in and through an education like this. So thank you for acknowledging that. That makes me feel good.
I think of like the avalanche of growth at Rice.
Yeah.
That was one of the first, accumulations of snow. You've doubled the MBA enrollment. You've grown tenured track faculty by over 40%. You then launched the hybrid MBA. We've talked about the online MBA and now the undergraduate business major. On top of that all, we have over 10,000 alums from Rice Business. So, all of these milestones, what was that guiding vision that connected them?
Well, they're all tied together. So thank you for mentioning that. That's an awful lot of growth. If there was one overarching theme of the last decade, I think growth is it. And the question is always like, well, why growth, or growth for what? And of course, clearly want growth for the good outcomes. And the good outcomes all start with pursuing the mission. We have a mission to create and disseminate knowledge at the vanguard of business and the business disciplines. And so that's what we really do. And when I was really looking at the job almost exactly 10 years ago and thinking about where Rice was and where it needed to be, one of the first conclusions that was easy to draw was that it needed to be about twice as big as it was. At least, and it's not that growth is all good, but why would I say that? And the thinking was, in order to advance that mission, we needed more tenure track faculty. And they're the foundation on which more or less everything else proceeds. They pursue both parts of the mission aggressively, the research side, the teaching side. They design the courses. Their quality also bestows a lot of your reputation in the market and amongst peer schools and peer faculty. So the beginning of any virtuous cycle to growth and national prominence really has to lead to more of them. The rub is it's hard to double. One of the things people worry about is, well, who's that going to be? Are you going to lower quality? Are you going to just throw the door open to admissions? We had to lower tuition to a point that you can't really deliver, and this is too costly for you to pursue. All these hurdles are in the way. And so when I was first having those conversations a decade ago, the thinking was, how would we pursue this growth? Good things were here. I've said it many times. Houston has amazing strategic foundations for a business school. We have so many Fortune 100, 500 companies, great entrepreneurship, a bustling, growing state, a very pro-business environment. It's perfect in that way. Also, Rice is sort of perfectly suited in that way. Great reputation, serious academics. But growth is not easy. And so I remember in that first meeting bringing up online as something I thought we needed to do. The technology could deliver well. I knew if we owned the program, we could make it very high quality, do something special in the market, really take advantage of the opening in Texas, a very big state with lots of great students in it, but everywhere else. And so it was a linchpin. The online program was discussed day one. And by 2 years in, we had it launched, but it was an uphill battle all the way through there. And now we're finishing year 8. And gosh, I think currently we have almost 400 students enrolled right now in that program. It's the biggest piece of our growth.
So, I mean, folks were skeptical of online and, quality of program and I guess the other potential risk with it.
Right.
How did you approach that? And how did you convince other stakeholders that this was the leap and the one worth taking?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, you begin all conversations with explaining the why. I think people listen when they hear the why, but everybody who was really critical listened and said, okay, what's the story? How would you do it? Okay, even if you get comfortable with the broad idea or understanding, yes, that could work here. The devil is sort of in the details. So who delivers it? Who makes the courses? How do we control quality, et cetera, et cetera. So a key was, being really forthright about two things. One of them was who would own the program, and the tenured faculty would own the program. In fact, we had almost all full professors, not quite, but almost all full professors design and deliver the main courses, design and deliver the entire curriculum so they could own it. I knew they were great quality, so they weren't going to mess up on the curriculum or anything like that. And I think if they felt like it's all ours, they could feel comfortable. The second thing was, well, what are we going to do with any resources generated from it? Is it going to be invested into itself? What do we do? And I said, for this and all the growth we have, our primary goal is reinvesting in more tenure track positions, which we can do. And in fact, our partner in delivering the online program, which is 2U, helped us on that end. And so we got going right away, and people could see the possibilities that, okay, we can make it high quality. We feel comfortable with that. We know that any good that comes of this will come back to mission. It's not going to be just frivolous things. And we think it's going to be sustainable in that way. You can continue to invest in the program. You can continue to provide good academic program support. All that case was won. And sort of once we had the internal folks convinced, I think the rest of the university came along too. They were also skeptical, like everybody else. But having, the business school say, we're comfortable, we're willing to give it a go, it's all on us, we'll deliver. The timing was right, and President Liban at the time was a big supporter. I think he wanted to see Rice at least try hard and online, and we did. And so we got most of that done in a little over a year. Yeah, we launched July of 2018. It was very exciting.
And one of the best parts of the online program is that you don't have to have the physical space. You're able to have this virtual campus.
No, you raise a great and an important point because I think one of the chief concerns was, where would we put everyone? What's this going to do to classrooms? Is it going to change the feel of the space? When do we do it? Like what time of day? All these questions come into the scene. And then you also get questions about capacity. Do we have the capacity to do that? So the argument was, well, actually, it's even better to do this virtually. We'll have no real threat of the space. And that way we can provide access. And so people can double up on the weekends, evenings, or daytime if they live locally, which they could. And then when we do our residencies, well, that's sort of specialized and we can manage that. We do that anyway. But it also meant that you preserve the feel of the physical campus in a way that gave assurance to everybody who was here. We're not going to flip a switch and change this overnight. The challenge we have is a lot of people who are interested and qualified and would flourish here at Rice can't match the schedule or don't have the location. And that's just math and logic. Of course, that's true. It's a big state, a big world, and lots of jobs, particularly amongst the most successful people, but just too demanding to let you, one, take off a lot of work, or two, take off significant time in the evening or weekends on a very predictable schedule for 2 years. So yeah, it made good sense. And then my other benefit, which would be, we learned a lot about delivering online that we didn't know. People who had maybe done nothing or had only dabbled became experts and began to think about it. And I knew that would happen, is the more they did it, the more they took it seriously and they learned how to get better, which improved their teaching in every aspect of the school.
So then I think about the other growth we had hinted on, which was the undergraduate business major. One of the biggest constraints was the capacity of McNair.
Yeah.
Could it really support that type of growth?
Yeah, that's right. Well, when we got to sort of the post-COVID environment, I think we'd learned a lot about hybrid delivery. We were hearing, we check our environment every year. More and more people who are professionals wanted access. They wanted something in between online and the programs we have. The hybrid MBA is really a modification of the weekend MBA program that allows you to come once per month. But that was going to add to the weekend, which is starting to get crowded. And really, McNair Hall was designed for none of that. It was designed for about 4 sections of a full-time program, maybe, and a couple of sections of EMBA on the weekend. But by the time we get to 2020, when we have the online and we're starting to think about hybrid and we have an undergraduate minor and we're thinking about a major, the building is being used really 6 nights a week, almost 7 days a week, every week of the year. It's almost completely overloaded. And we know we just can't do it. The math stopped working. So the prospect of getting an undergraduate major approved, which we did in 2021, meant that we'd have to start thinking about a building. And it was about that time that we started thinking about a building. By the way, all throughout that period from 2016 to 2021, we renovated parts of the building every year. So the second floor, which I'm on today, was completely redone. We did the first floor before that. We added a west wing on the first floor. We were doing everything we could to add more spaces. Renovated 116, which is kind of a special, nice, big flat room, all of these things. But there are just so many tricks you can pull, and then you're just out of building. And so we started a big push then and finally got that approved. And I don't know if you can hear it now, but there's some drills and mechanized equipment and cranes outside my window today, as they have been for about 2 years, finishing up a brand new, big, great expansion.
But you went, to seek approval for a new building, coming from a place of showing that growth was possible and actually it fit for the current market and what folks were looking for.
No, I think that's right. An expansion to McNair had been considered before. I think in 2014, there was a thinking that they might get there. And the Board of Trustees reached a conclusion, which I would agree with, I believe, if I'd seen the data. What I've seen said, no, they didn't really have capacity constraints at the time that warranted growth. Probably through some rescheduling and other activities, you could manage that. But we demonstrated it in a big way. By the time we got to 2020 and 2021, even with a large proportion of our students being online, we just couldn't do it anymore. We had the busiest working building on the campus. In fact, if you look from 2016 to today, I'm pretty sure about 60% of the rough growth in all student populations at Rice University has been in the business school. So that's a great deal of growth. And the university has grown too at the undergraduate space, but we definitely needed the space. So the 7 new classrooms, the 30-ish to 40-ish new offices and many other spaces are going to be badly needed. But we demonstrated that, and that made it easier to go to donors, other philanthropists around town and say, we could use your support to do something really good and valuable for Houston, the region, and certainly for the university.
And so, having been in McNair, grown all these programs, see everything, when you thought of the new building, was there a certain part of the design that was a non-negotiable that you felt was just absolutely needed?
That was an interesting part. Our architects are great. They know how to think through these problems and to ask a lot of questions. And so I can remember in the interview phase and the proposal phase, talking to all these firms. And the question they ask you, which always puts you on the spot a little bit, is like, well, what's your vision, and et cetera? And how do you think about, what are your values? What is the feel? It almost sounds like an emotional design, but it's really trying to evoke what are you trying to accomplish? How does this space matter? What messages do you need to deliver? What does it say about the school, about your values and the like? And that's a great exercise. I don't think we do it enough, and it certainly wasn't something I did on my own. But the more we did that, we talked about a few things that were important. One was we wanted the building to be a place where people were very happy to come and convene. Certainly students, people involved in business at the corporate level, at startups, all the way around. I wanted them to feel like they belonged here, that they could come to Rice. They wanted to be there. This was where the action was. There was energy, innovativeness, excitement, an academic perspective on what growth in business and changes in the business environment meant for the world. So all that was boiled down by, better people than me into, a view of a much more open, lit, artistic, modern addition. So, the design of McNair Hall, which is exquisite, it's a Robert A.M. Stern building, and it sort of has this Spanish design that's reminiscent of what you see at Baker and other places, needed to be complemented by something that wasn't quite that. It might harken back to a few of those design points, but it'd bring in much more light. It'd make a lot of space available to people that was unbooked. So just a lot of places to sit, be quiet, be in a small group, be alone, no need for special access. We needed food, which is key. Yeah, I heard that a lot. Food all throughout the day, different types, and great coffee. And of course, we need the standard things, classrooms, PhD space. So, we threw all that together and we needed to fit in this geography we have here where it didn't invade the Terrell, it fit beneath the view shed of the building. And, the design reflects that. And I can't wait for everybody to see it. It's something to see in a two-dimensional image or rendering. I think being in the space is going to make people feel very different. And I think it's going to accomplish those goals.
So, I mean, we hinted on it, the establishment of the Virani undergraduate business major. I mean, it was a huge step. So, what was really your underlying vision for Rice Business at the time when you brought that into the fold?
The Virani School is going to have huge impact. I think the upside for it is limitless. It's going to be fantastic. Thinking about, if you go all the way back where we began our conversation, I was definitely thinking about online, adding more students to the full-time and the other programs. I don't know that I had hybrid on my mind yet, but in general, that growth. And we've added graduate certificates in healthcare this year. We're growing further. But undergrad was always a key piece, and there are just a few reasons for it that really matter. One, it's a very high demand field for young students and their parents. They're very interested in undergraduate business. We had a minor at Rice, but undergraduate business isn't available everywhere. I would say if you went through your sort of US News list and the top 100 schools, I'd say, 90 to 100 almost all have it, but 1 to 10, it's maybe 3. So there is this scattering of the big Northeast Ivy schools where it just doesn't that present. Everywhere else it is. And Rice was sort of built in the mold of some of those, plus some liberal arts colleges with which everyone would be familiar. And so it had this idea of a presence of business maybe, but not a major. So my view was, let's make a case for the academic value of a major within this great university where the major takes up about a third of your credit hours, but 2/3 you spend in the other schools in engineering, humanities, social sciences, architecture, music, whichever one you want, you could spend your time there. And the upward value of that, having very well-rounded students who could have explored lots of interest in these younger years, but then get real depth in business and be ready to get that first job, start their career in a place that can be rewarding. And we've had one terrific Rice undergraduate, so incredibly bright. Rice has the history and the privilege of being highly selective on who we bring in and really being, choosy on the quality of folks. And you see it when you meet our undergraduates. And then I thought they would really be able to elevate the university too, because now you would be able to compete with, and you just tick off the list. Well, the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, of course, has a great undergraduate program. Schools like Cornell have a great undergraduate program. If you went to UT McCombs or Texas A&M Mays or SMU Cox, in the state even, those schools are overwhelmed with demand from great students, especially in and around Texas. And that's what they're looking for. Some of them we'd be more than happy to have, but I think they look the other way because I think their concern was maybe we can't get to the same places in terms of career, but we've addressed that and it's going fantastic. And I think an interesting anecdote to that is I think the Virani family got interested because we announced that degree program around the time their son Braz was graduating. And I think he really would have preferred to be a major, but I also believe being a Rice undergraduate, he knew firsthand and maybe better than anyone that it would really succeed. It was really a good, smart idea and that, good things would come from it. So we had a terrific entry point into a conversation with a really philanthropic family who got behind us in a big way at the right time.
The one thing I think about, and I'm kind of like back to my undergrad, the big difference now is having AI and having the capability at your fingertips.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that? And, as we send undergrads and then MBAs out into the world, into this new AI driven world.
It's a topic we think about every day. I don't think I've stopped thinking about it deeply and actively for 2 years now. I think there's always the feeling that I believe everybody has, which is, gosh, this is hard to keep up with. I can't see around this corner. There are a lot of possibilities everyone's happy to sketch out. It's hard to know what probabilities to put on any of the path. There's kind of a joke that, one path is nirvana and the other path is like the Terminator. You sort of are between these heavenly outcomes where productivity is massive and well-being is great, and the other ones where we're just completely subordinated to this power we've created. I'm less worried than I was a year ago. I see firms adapting in ways that still leverage a lot of human capability, that still value and leverage a lot of human judgment. And, I try not to be unduly optimistic, but I think that's still the path forward. So we've got to do a couple of things that are pretty basic. On the basic part of our mission, which is delivering an education, we have to do two things. We have to prepare people to think really critically and to be able to assess them as individuals without this incredible, unprecedented tool. That is to say, what can Peter do of his own accord? What does he know? And then I have to train him very aggressively to make sure that with the tool, he's also highly capable, far more capable to do some things, and as capable as anybody in any university in the country is using the tool. So there's sort of almost sounds like a martial arts mastery. You have to sort of like, wax on, wax off, learn these sort of things that are apart from the tool. And then you're sort of empowered. That's where we are, is trying to do that. I think going too all in for us risks, and by that I mean training students from AI aggressively at the beginning, risks maybe losing some of that. An example might be, I'd like you to go through your core finance course. It'd still have to do kind of the hard work. Not that I'm going to make you do heavy calculations or anything, but I don't want you to ask ChatGPT or pick your Gen AI to give you an answer or to produce the scenarios, or even maybe to make your discounted cash flow files. I might want you to do a little bit of that first, but then I need you to learn. You don't have to do almost any of that. You can empower something else, but I need you to be the chef behind the cuisine.
You want them to be skeptical
Yeah,
and you want to develop their ability to judge the information.
I think that's right. And I think at the end of the day, we do think about the ethics in a very important way too. Where's the boundary, no matter what is possible? And with agentic AI, I think almost more than you can imagine is imaginable. What's the boundary a good leader or manager might want where, someone with a heartbeat is making a decision or casting a final judgment or intervening? And I think that's our caution right now for the world, which is, what do we want out of this? Clearly, we can have a lot of outcomes, and we should probably shape actively the ones we really prefer. Another piece of our thought is, well, doing what scientists and academics do, which is to think about the future and imagining and asking, what could AI do? What's it going to do to the shapes of certain industries and the jobs that are produced? What's going to be left? Or what will we be moving into? We've seen thematically, at least, this type of thing before. Technological change has been disruptive in job markets. This appears to be of an extraordinary scale, maybe an unprecedented scale. Certainly that feels like it to me. But, we need to think about that and imagine what that means going forward and be prepared. Because obviously, if you work backwards, we're a professional school. We need to be able to ready people for professions. If some of them are changing, we need to get ready for that. If some of them are evolving, we have to be ready for that. And if some of them are really going away, we should be ready for that too. So that's the other side. But we're at the early stage. I think 2 years ago, when this was just emerging, everybody sort of raced ahead to try to do something, or at least say they're doing something. But now you can see we're all slowing down a little bit, trying to be more thoughtful and cautious. So I think about it all the time. It's changing, and we have to change with it. We know it's not optional.
Yeah.
So we're trying to just stay ahead and do our jobs well.
I had a discussion with Professor Capuano, and we were talking about kind of AI in her class, and she has her students use it. They use it together. But then she'll often find the pitfalls of reading an AI generated response and not knowing that it was inaccurate or not exactly the truth. And I think she was saying those lessons, you can kind of see it calculate, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you need to go back. You need to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, you can tell that when you're reading exams and things. And it's like any of us who have our own professions, our own expertise, because you know it, you know when the AI gives you good output. But if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know. And you think that looks highly plausible or that seems exactly right. And so there is that issue where the expertise is still needed and it's not that easy to develop, if you over rely on that crutch. So there's that spacing and that pace. We're trying to deal with that. I think the other part, frankly, we've talked about how do we make sure that exams are taking honestly. And I think most of that is to assure students that their peers are operating on a level playing field. I think that can often be one of the big challenges that unwinds confidence in a program is when you look and you think, I want to do this the right way and understand this deeply. But if everybody else in the class is using AI and getting A's, I have to think about whether or not I can go without it or not. So we need to make sure that everyone feels like it's a level playing field. When we ask you to not use the AI, no one is going to use it. And when we ask you to use it, of course, you use it. And for that, we probably need to think about our processes. 5 years ago, we didn't have that kind of a problem. Today, we do. We need to think about it.
Who knew that being a dean could have so many headwinds and changes come your way?
Not me. I think that it's always interesting. It's always new. There are lots of different challenges. It's still fun, but yeah, it's Wild West sometimes.
So, in terms of rankings, Rice Business really performs well nationally, especially in the areas of entrepreneurship and finance. And why do you think that is?
It's interesting. Rankings are always, I think every dean, every academic leader thinks, I don't know where they get some of these, right? It can be kind of tough, and there's a great rankings business. A few things tend to shine through, though. I'd say that overall, if you averaged all rankings together, you start to get more signal than noise. Looking at any one individually, you tend to get more noise than signal. But when you look at all of ours together, I think one of the highlights you always see for the business school is entrepreneurship. And I think there are really two big things I can think of that I'm confident about. One is we had an early start. I think we took entrepreneurship more seriously earlier than most schools. And it's largely because we had some professors here who took it upon themselves. So Ed Williams and Al Napier maybe did the most in that regard. Certainly, if they did more than anybody else I know of in that regard. But I don't want to leave anybody out. People like Dennis Murphy and others did a lot too. To kind of get that started and talk about it in an active way, treat it more seriously, give it more attention. And, they built momentum. So that's 25 plus years ago. Not that other business schools weren't doing it, but we did it well and have kept up. So I'll say that. Have kept up and done it in smart ways. And people like Brad Burke and Yao Hochberg, who do that today here, have added immeasurably to our success. But the other thing is really Houston. I think being a business school in a major urban area with high growth and high appetite for business means you just are in the environment in a way that is hard to replicate anywhere else. If you went to Silicon Valley, they would say something similar. People have said that a long time about Stanford. They'd say, they're really good at what they do, but so much is the environment itself. How could you not succeed? That is really important there, and it's super important here. The other thing I always tell people is that Houston loves risk takers. It's part of the environment. It's part of a Texas thing too, but it's going to space, drilling out in the Permian Basin or deep in the ocean, putting in an artificial heart, whatever it is. I think there's a real admiration for trying hard things and picking yourself up if you fail and not being discouraged because things didn't go right the first time. I think there's a sense of, kind of chest out. We do big, hard things here and we're proud of it. And it doesn't work every time, but we keep going. And so when people want to engage with Rice in the business school, oftentimes the thing that they want to be most involved with is how can I help somebody start and try something hard and walk them through a difficult process? So it's a great business city. It's a super great entrepreneurship city. Last thing I'd say about that is that's also true about the the many immigrant populations that are here. I always tell people, we know this, Houston's one of the most diverse cities in the country. It's a city of great diversity because it's a city of great opportunity. People can come here. There's no zoning. You can get something cheap, get started. There are downsides to that, but the upside is you get a shot. You get a ticket and you can get on the ride and see if you can make it work. And for many people, that chance is all they need. And we see that over and over with entrepreneurs who have come here, are born here and are drawn here to succeed. So that environmental feature and a good start with pioneers has made the difference. And that's something we can't lose really, unless we're really silly and make bad choices, which we're not going to do. But we're fortunate, and that's where that comes from. And that's why it's so strong. I think it's even stronger than recognized sometimes, but that's why we're so good at it.
And I think you've nailed it. This, environment of Houston itself, that
Mhm.
ecosystem brings out so much opportunity. I think the other thing that Rice Business has tied into it, this integration with Lilly and Rice Alliance to the ION.
Yeah, yeah.
So what made that kind of coordination and growth possible through those?
Those are the key elements of our entrepreneurship delivery system, and it's growing still and doing well. On the internal side, go back, Yael Hogberg comes to us, great background. She's been everywhere important, Stanford and Northwestern and other places, leading an entrepreneurship program. She was brought in to be the head of the entrepreneurship initiative at Rice University by David Lebron, joins in 2015. A little bit later, we get Lilly, which is essentially the heart of entrepreneurship education at the university. It delivers all of our credit-bearing courses to the students here. I think, say one or two, and it does just an amazing job. So it's meant to be exactly what you need, a place that's not just a classroom, but kind of a living community for anyone interested in entrepreneurship, particularly our students who are graduates and undergraduates, and they do a famously good job at that. Before Lilly, we had the Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship, which performed a lot of those duties and now more focuses as, I think, kind of a platform for the launching and the commercialization of ideas from outside of Rice that connect into Rice or from the laboratories in some ways. We all play a role in that, and they do. And nowadays, I think Brad Burke has done a great job there, particularly with the Rice Business Plan competition. There are many things I could point out, but if I were to call out one, it will be the world's largest and richest business plan competition, which is, it's the March Madness of entrepreneurship at colleges and universities. We always get Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, Harvard, teams from the best universities and all universities come to compete. It's fantastic. It's unprecedented and great, and that's made a big difference. That team is now running the programming at the ION, which is a Rice-sponsored space designed to scale that presence into the city and beyond. And that continues to grow. Even today, we recently added startup garages, if you will, at the ION through what we call the Nexus. And there's going to be more wet labs and dry labs put out adjacent to the ION and graduate housing. So this investment around this entrepreneurship ecosystem is designed to grow Rice and commercialize Rice ideas and IP and original research, and to expand the opportunities of our students. So, we're up in the ante on anybody who wants to try to compete with us for that. And I think that's been terrific for us. But we work together on all of that. I think this entrepreneurship ecosystem is essentially unmatched. I think it's superb, and we continue to do good work and collect good people to do it.
So I'm sure when you were interviewing to become the dean of Rice Business, you were in front of a committee sharing your vision, talking about your experience. From sitting there and what you thought the job was going to be to today, 10 years later, tell me what you couldn't have understood before really stepping into this role.
So I had run programs at a school for about 5 years. And before that, I'd been heavily involved in some other dean work at a dean level. And I could imagine what it meant to design and deliver MBA programs, what it meant to think about business programs in general, and to do most of the inside work. I could do all the inside work, I'd say. I knew what it was like to sort of run the organization and the key leaders, like the head of the Career Center, the head of admissions, the head of exec ed, the folks who do student programs, tech, all of that. That's different when you're really in charge, when you're the final say on a lot of that. So that was different, but not of an inordinate scale. I think it's the outside work. I couldn't quite imagine as much. And I think it was harder to sort of see year by year challenges like how do you keep momentum? How do you stay ahead? How do you deal with headwinds? And a lot of that's the outside work too. By the outside, I mean working across the university with other deans and the leadership, namely the provost and the president, and then working in the broader community to raise money for the school. A big part of the job is philanthropy, but also to be the ambassador of the university and its business school into the corporate environment, into the business environment. That I think was a little bit new and different to me. And I've loved it. It's really interesting. But I remember thinking, what should I do here? What's the call? But some of those are, for example, universities school by school tend to be very different. We share a lot in common with peers, but I'm not much like the music school, and I'm not much like the School of Natural Sciences with labs and heavy reliance on grants and a very different profile and a very different, set of professionals, in some ways equally interested in academia, highly trained, of course, but different. And so coming up with and talking about policies for all of this matter. And then, of course, there are some trade-offs. If you think about an undergraduate program, that's not a win for everybody in the university or isn't seen as one. I think that's a hard thing to think about, when you're just in one school like mine or just in somebody else's. We, of course, had different, tough issues like Hurricane Harvey, and we had the freeze in 21, and we had COVID, which, of course, nobody was thinking about that. And I think that's the part where you get the exigent sort of leader questions, and you're like, okay, what do we do here? You have a role to play, and you have to do it. The other piece on the outside, on the philanthropic side, I've really enjoyed, it's really the public relations side, maybe put differently. I love talking about the school. I like being involved in different civic organizations and getting to know people. I think getting to know people and getting to know how they thought about the school from the outside was a great benefit, but I hadn't done enough of that before I got here. So that felt a little bit different for sure. Then there's just the usual stuff, there's people in organizations. Those are always challenging. So you learn more about yourself and you learn how to live your values a little bit better and what you care about. But it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot from it. It's been terrific.
So, Dean Peter, one of the things that recently I was fortunate enough to do was volunteer and speak to recently admitted students to the full-time program. One of those students was kind of on the edge and considering a Ivy League East Coast school or Rice Business. His thoughts and concerns were around kind of the energy world and looking at a career pivot into commodities. Could you kind of speak about Rice's vision and connection to energy and, are we hedging purely to renewables or are we split between that and conventional?
That's a good question. I think the presence of energy in the minds of everyone in the world are much larger than they had been only a few years ago. And there's two reasons for that. I think the first reason is one that's been around for a while would be concern about climate change, a concern about, a transition into renewable sources. How fast should that take place? How do we do it? We've talked about that a lot, and we've committed a lot of resources to understanding that. But the second, and the one that is, I think, dominating currently, is the massive energy requirements of the data revolution and AI. I think any forward projection for the energy demands of the future has to be all of the above. It isn't because people and governments may not have a preference, but because meeting those demands will require different types of energy sources because they're not completely substitutable for each other. And being the energy capital of the world, Houston thinks about all of those. We, of course, have a very long-standing, deeper than anyone else's, as a business school, fossil fuel understanding through companies like Chevron and Exxon, great examples, but also deep connections to all of the resources dedicated in companies like those and many others in renewable spaces for wind, solar, geothermal, of course, natural gas and all those other types. If anyone had an interest in energy, there's no question, this is a slam dunk. You should be at Rice because we think about it that way. It's not that from the ivory tower or whatever, we're thinking the world should become this. We, take the environment as it is and talk about, well, what's the phenomenon taking place and how is it being shaped? And of course, we always talk about the pros and cons of each pathway forward. And I was just having a conversation with one of our professors today on this very topic. Rice needs to prepare leaders to be ready for all of those paths forward. And I would bet today that we're going to need a very broad set of energy sources for the future, including more renewables, more fossil fuels, and everything we haven't yet discovered or produced in sufficient quantity.
And I think the way your view of the conversation, that's why when you walk the halls of McNair now, you see a mix of companies representing that.
We do. And we have companies that are deep into the renewable space and companies that are hedging. And we have, of course, traditional fossil fuel based companies.
So recently we celebrated 50 years of Rice Business, and now we have the new building on the horizon. What's next in this chapter for Rice Business?
Well, I don't know where to put us along our overall time frame, but you could certainly look at the first 50 years as sort of birth through adolescence, I'd say. In that 50 years, we didn't quite reach 10,000 alumni, but the statistic I like to give people is in the first 20 or so years, we had fewer than 1,000. So the easy math is we averaged less than 50 students a year for the first 20 years. We have a relatively small alumni base at our origin and a much larger one today. So I think we've really come into our fullness. And I think we're really much more of a national competitor. And we put into the workforce lots of great leaders. So the next 10 and 20 years are going to see us have an unprecedented and high number of leaders of top firms and organizations, in traditional firms, corporate America, in startups, in firms that have yet to be created. So that's incredibly exciting for us and for what our future holds. I think we're going to see that maturity and that sort of full benefit come back to our professional programs at the graduate level in ways that we haven't yet enjoyed. And so for those schools, traditional East Coast schools that have had alumni bases that are large for 50 years, we'll finally be toe to toe. And I really look forward to that sort of flowering and emergence on the graduate side. In addition to all the curricular enhancements we'll undertake for those programs, we'll have that. And we'll start to see the undergraduate program really come into national prominence in a way it hasn't yet. When we started, you had to overcome the basics, which is getting students in high school to think, well, I'm interested in say, a finance degree or a marketing degree, but I know Rice doesn't do that. To now think I should consider them alongside everywhere else. And so we'll see the Virani school elevate relatively quickly, and we'll see how we fuse these cultures together and bring in even better faculty and more great students. So the next 10 to 20 years are going to see that. And then I'd make one more prediction, which I think will be true at many places, is I believe strongly that we will integrate more deeply with the rest of the universities in a lot of our programs, that you'll see combinations with social sciences, the humanities, in the STEM fields, maybe even other universities. I think that that's the work ahead for universities, is how we take the best of and give students even more choice and options. So I think that's really coming soon. And I think we're going to add strength to the university and vice versa.
It's all so exciting. In anticipation of us talking today, I asked the Alumni Association board if they had any questions they want to ask you. And one of our volunteers, Kim Denny, proposed asking, as alums, what would you like to see us do to help the school?
Oh, that's a great question. So thanks to Kim and thanks to you for asking Kim's question. The number one thing I always want is for people to stand up and speak up for Rice, wherever they are, in the firm you're in the community you're in. Make sure people know you're from Rice. Get the swag, wear the swag, put the stickers on, whatever it is, and mention us when the time comes to look for talent or to look for opportunity. We haven't had enough of that. The other one is get involved. I think so many students, there are missing cohorts, missing classmates where they get involved with each other maybe or not at all, but we need them more involved in the alumni association than they are. We will be a lot stronger when we do that. So if you haven't, make it a point, do something. It could be small, come to a reception, come to a reunion, get back in touch with someone, but be more involved because that presence builds and it amplifies. And without it, it doesn't really matter as much the rest. So once you get involved, you'll see great opportunities to help our current students, to help yourselves, and to help others by connecting and building this much stronger network. That's such a key factor for business schools. And slow scale, low diffusion, low participation. Those are the death knells of a great network. We want higher scale, higher participation, high engagement. And so all that means is you get involved. You're going to like these people. You liked them before. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a space to come in that you'll like. But yeah, get more involved and speak up for Rice. Those are my big requests.
Thank you very much, Dean Peter. I really appreciate you joining me today and for the conversation. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the new building and seeing what's ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks to all the alumni. This has been great. I look forward to it. I can't wait to welcome you to the new space. You'll like it.
Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcast. We'd love to hear what you think. The host of I'll Have You Know are myself, Brian Jackson, and Maya Pomeroy.